The South African Health Products Regulatory Authority isn't approving Russia's COVID-19 Sputnik V vaccine. It's because of concerns about its safety in populations at risk of HIV infection. Well, let's take you now to KwaZulu-Natal research and innovation sequencing platform infectious diseases expert, Dr. Richard Lessells. Dr. Lessells, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. So this has been an ongoing issue, the data and the research when it comes to the vulnerability, if I can describe it that way, or the vulnerability that this vaccine creates when it comes to HIV infection. What's the real issue here? And Dr. Lessells, in layman's terms, if you can explain to us.
Yeah, good evening, Kathy, and good evening to the viewers. I mean, I think, again, it just shows how rigorous this process is that SAHPRA follows as a regulatory authority to really dig deep into the data that exists about these vaccines and to really think about the safety of the vaccine in the population. Here, the concern is about the vector that's used, so the adenovirus, the common cold virus that's used as the vector for this vaccine, and the concern is based on results from previous studies of a investigational HIV vaccine that showed that in people given the vaccine, in men given the vaccine, there was an increased risk of acquiring HIV, so of being infected with HIV, as opposed to a decreased risk, which they were hoping for with the vaccine. And it was seen particularly in men that weren't circumcised and men that had antibodies to that adenovirus, to that common cold virus. And so there's been a lot of research to understand that. And we understood that was then a risk if COVID vaccines were going to be designed based on that vector. And I think what I understand here is that the company haven't been able to kind of give sufficient safety data that really pertains to that risk, that reassures that risk does not exist.
What kind of data would be needed in this instance, Dr. Lessells? Because ultimately, South Africa has the highest infection rate of HIV in the world, and comparatively, we're much higher than any of our other counterparts that may be dealing with HIV infections and treatments. So I guess what I'm asking is that comparatively, no country has the burden of HIV disease like we do. So would their data really be sufficient to explain or to give an idea of what would happen in South Africa?
Well, I mean, I think you're right. It's a challenge as to what data could we have that would reassure us, and I don't know exactly what data SAHPRA requested from the company. I mean, the first step might have been to do animal studies, to do studies where you give the vaccine to animals and then expose them to an HIV-like virus and see whether it increased the risk of HIV infection in those animals. So that would be one possibility. Clearly, the data in humans is much more difficult, as you say. We could ask for safety data from places from the trials and from places where the Sputnik has been rolled out. But that requires really close monitoring of people, and to do HIV testing for large numbers of people in a mass rollout of a vaccine is complicated. So I think there is a challenge with knowing what data would reassure us on this, and it's difficult.
There are some, of course, who would look at the conversation and say, well, this issue of data is being used as a red herring. Because there are groups in this country, including political organizations, who believe that vaccines manufactured from the global south, as it were, whether it's Russia, whether it's China, have not been given preference in terms of preferred vaccines, particularly for the South African population, and that these are being scrutinized a lot more than other vaccines. Do you have a particular view on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of these arguments, but I don't follow the logic really. And I think here you're seeing a very specific issue that's been raised and where data has been requested on this specific issue. And as SAHPRA say, they haven't been provided with that data. I think it's also important to note that the Sputnik vaccine hasn't yet received an emergency use authorization listing from the World Health Organization. And the World Health Organization say that they are still awaiting data from the company about the vaccine. So I think this is not unique to SAHPRA. And it is right that SAHPRA interrogates these concerns that it has specifically about using the vaccine in the South African population.
Do you think there's anything particular that SAHPRA can be doing to ensure that the public not only learn more about their processes, but that the transparency that they're applying across the board when approving some of these vaccines for emergency use, that perhaps there's a better understanding of that, and therefore the integrity won't be questioned as much as it is right now? The reality is that most people did not even know about SAHPRA before we came into COVID-19.
Yeah, but I mean, I think if people follow it closely, they should be impressed by the work that SAHPRA has done through this pandemic. I mean, I'm extremely impressed by the work that SAHPRA has done, and I have no link to SAHPRA at all. The work that people within SAHPRA and kind of expert committee members and things are doing day in, day out is really impressive. And I have to say they've been transparent as well, and I've seen numerous kind of webinars and things explaining the processes, detailing how they go about reviewing a submission from a vaccine company. So I think there has been transparency. Of course, there can always be more transparency. So you could hold kind of public meetings and that would be open to everybody to see how these committees work and things, and we see that in some places in the United States, for example. But I don't know if that would be appropriate here. But I think that people saying that these things are not transparent is a bit of a unfair statement, personally.
Dr. Richard Lessells, let's leave it there for tonight. He's an infectious diseases expert at the KwaZulu-Natal Research and Innovation Sequencing Platform.